Many old houses have treasures in the attic, but few have such a treasure trove as this. Jim Flanagan, you might say, is a cornerstone of Balleek potteries, responsible for the maintenance of buildings and machinery, and his father before him. All earthenware, sound and good, basins with gilded wastes, patented plate warmers, only waiting to be filled from a kettle of hot water, and old hotel and railway company ware, carrying the dust of over 100 years. Balleek set up 130 years ago an industry that was also a work of art, and that over all those years provided employment for generations of craftsmen, and that still flourishes, and that is still a matter of national pride. The name of Balleek is known around the world. Up in the north, as myself and many another can truly testify, we are all very conscious, and were conscious, and from an early age, of the name of Balleek. If the cups you were using at table were Balleek, even the earthenware, you were pointedly reminded of that. When distinguished visitors called, the delicate Balleek china was produced and commented on, and the praise was duly and proudly accepted. Remembering Lough Erne, the poet William Allingham wrote of the loch that winds through islands under Turraw mountain green, and Castle Caldwell stretching woods with tranquil bays between. The home of John Caldwell Bloomfield, the last of the Caldwell dynasty, a good and improving landlord, a type not too often found in the Ireland of his time, with a genuine concern for the people of the area who had suffered so cruelly from the famine. He was an amateur chemist and was fortunate to discover deposits of kaolin and feldspar on his estate, the principal ingredients of porcelain. The feldspar was quarried, ground up, and could be mixed with the china clay. He also had the good fortune to meet Robert Williams Armstrong, an engineer, architect, and ceramic historian, quite by accident, it is told, when the two of them were browsing around a Dublin antique shop. It was the genius of Armstrong that helped to design the new pottery building and machinery. The mighty Erne, at that time and in that place, one of the most powerful rivers in Europe, that was to supply the power and dictated the site of the pottery at Balleek, in Irish, Béal Liacha, the ford of the flagstone. The pottery finally opened in July 1857, choosing for its trademark wolfhound, harp, and the Devonish round tower. In the morning, Perrian ware, still hot from the kilns, is gathered. That fine word Perrian we owe to the Greek island of Pharos, where in classical times a fine white marble was quarried. Nowadays, the Balik clay body is made up of china clay from Cornwall, ground feldspar from Norway, and frit, a type of manufactured ground glass. It is added to water and blended for several hours in a huge ball mill, in the same way as flour is added to milk in a pancake mix. The slip, as it is now called, passes through the sieving unit, where lawns hold back lumps of undissolved clay, and over a series of electromagnetic bars which remove particles of iron which would oxidize during the first firing and appear as rusty specks on the china. Slip has the consistency of thick cream. The mill room with its heavy machinery is located on the ground floor. Then begins the long hall to the Perrian workshops. Sean Coyle's first task every morning is to cast whatever article he is currently producing from the working molds. He stirs the slip to remove air bubbles that could affect the reproduction of the design, which is embossed on the inside of the molds. The delicate translucency of Balik china is the result of the skilled judgment of the caster, determined by how long the slip is allowed to remain in the mold, building up the walls of the article before the excess is poured away to be reused. The piece has to remain in the mold curing until it is strong enough to support itself. As it sets, the clay shrinks slightly, releasing itself from the design. At this stage it is known as greenware and is very, very fragile. This is the body of a teapot. The larger the article, the longer the curing. In this instance, about 2 to 3 hours, but it can't be left over long in the mould or it would become too dry for the next stage. Liam Macaulay assembles all the parts that go to make up a teapot. Spouts and handles are cast separately. Approximately 40 pieces can be cast from a working mould before it becomes worn. Clay selvage is carefully removed where it has overflowed the pattern, but it won't be wasted, as we shall see. To my ignorant eye, this looks a little like tap dancing on the railings on top of the Eiffel Tower. What would happen if? Sean Boyle has worked for 35 years in the pottery. His father was a kiln man in the days of the bottle kilns, when all the ware was coal-fired. The coal was delivered by train right into the pottery yard, on a branch line off the main Enniskillen and Bundoran line. Gussie McGonigal joined the pottery on exactly the same day, the 22nd of June, 1951. They used to have a lift in the pottery, but the vibration was so extreme it scattered the ware in all directions. Fettling is the process of piecing the parts together and making good seams and joints. In those long, dreaming summers when I was a boy in Omagh, American aunts and uncles came to revisit the scenes of their youth. What they wanted most always to bring back with them began with Balik china and Belfast linen. and went on as far as mountain heather, white or purple, or the branch of some blossoming tree recalled from boyhood or girlhood. In Crawford and Wilson's great hardware store in Omagh, there was one large window devoted entirely to the display of the produce of Balleek, and townspeople and country people and visitors from elsewhere used to stand gazing at it as if it were a wayside altar shrine. Liam Macaulay is a good representative of the strong family traditions that have always been maintained in this place. He is of the fourth generation of his family to work here. There was an ancestor present even at the building of the pottery. He was working on the pediment, when, as the story goes, he took an unscheduled trip to the ground. The lucky man, though, landed on his feet, and the great Armstrong ran to him, gave him a glass of whisky, and sent him back up the ladder. The clay is still damp, and the articles have to be kept that way, or it would not be possible to piece them together. The same slip is used, thickened with common salt, to disguise the joints and stick the pieces together. The way to describe their state is like butter and cheese. They are butter soft, coming out of the moulds, and cheese hard for joining and fettling, the removal of the seams, and the sharpening up of the designs. At this stage, the teapot goes to a nearby drying room to spend the night. The following morning, Liam will make its lid, but today he moves on to a batch he made yesterday. A finished ware is carried to the large drying rooms adjacent to the kilns, or brought to the flouring shop to receive applied decoration. Apparian workers are paid by the piece. Liam can, on average, finish 22 teapots a day, and 100 to 110 in a working week. Albert Elliott works in what is known as the middle or special shop, where newly designed pieces are cast and carefully assembled for the first time. This is the range of Parian china called Springtime, about to be launched by the pottery. It is also in this shop that old pieces, out of production for perhaps 50 years, are reintroduced. These are lithophanes, first designed about 1908. Slip is carefully poured over the surface of the mould. It is allowed to cure and is skillfully scraped as thin as safety will allow. Another weight, and with extreme care, it is blown from the mould. Another Macaulay, Vincent, a cousin of Liam's. Lithophanes, like stained glass, are designed to be backlit. St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York, before the skyscrapers were built around it. It is here in the design and modelling studio that the work truly begins. Fergus Cleary creates an entirely new piece for the Balleek collection. Once it has been designed and drawn on paper, a solid model is made in plaster of Paris. But first the profile is turned on the lath. There has always been a long tradition of fine modellers in the pottery. William Gallimore was the first. A chief modeller at Gosses, Stoke-on-Trent, he was invited to Beleek by Robert Williams Armstrong in 1857. Armstrong also influenced the design of some of the early pieces, and his wife, formerly Annie Langley Nairn, who was a noted watercolourist, with a genuine feeling for nature, is credited with the design of a number of the early botanical and marine subjects, many of which are still produced today by Beleek. The hand carving of the model is a lengthy and meticulous task. This piece will take 10 working days. Working from his drawing, Fergus has accurately to reproduce the design in the soft plaster. Fergus's grandfather, James Cleary, was also a modeller. He was trained by William Gallimore, after the latter lost his right arm in a shooting accident. And some of the Beleek china is named after the Cleary family. His grandfather went on to become the first Beleek-born manager in 1884. His brother Edward Cleary succeeded him in 1900. The model is liberally coated in soft soap to prepare it for the mould making and to prevent the plaster of Paris from sticking to it. A template is made to form an accurate division between the two halves of the mould and will act as a shuttering to contain the plaster. Cotling, a strange word for the piece of material which goes over the top of the mould to further contain the plaster. Once mixed, the plaster of Paris must be used quickly. It sets hard in a matter of minutes. When one half is completed, the same operation follows for the other half and the bottom of the mould. Now the hard edges have to be removed from the mould to make it a pleasing shape and good to handle. The mould is made in 3 parts, the bottom and the 2 sides, to facilitate the removal of the model. This is the master mould, which carries the negative image from the model on the inside. The master mould will now be passed on to the mould making shop, where the master case mould will be made, as we shall see. The first trial piece out of the working mould, with additional piercing by Fergus. The production line, you might say, for the pottery begins here in the mould-making shop, where the working moulds for casting the final pieces are made. But to understand this sequence better, we must go back to the master mould, which has come from Fergus Cleary. From this master mould, a master case mould is made in a specially hard casting plaster. The master mould is the white uppermost section. From this positive master case mould can be reproduced the many working moulds. On the left is the model, and beside it the master mould made by Fergus Cleary in 3 sections. Next, the positive master case mould. From that can be made the many working moulds used for casting the final piece. Perhaps it is not fully realised what a diverse range of ware Beleek has produced over the years, from the finest porcelain to common ware, even to telephone insulators. These fine old copper plates now, which have recently come to light, were used to transfer the design onto earthenware by means of lithography. The plates were coated in mineral paint, placed in a mangle press, the design transferred onto paper and to the ware, which was glazed and fired. One might be excused from thinking that our story had taken an irreversible plunge into the preparation of some exotic dish for the table, though gum arabic is one of the main ingredients of chewing gum. Nonetheless, Joe Leonard knows the ingredients are refined and pure, Parian scraps saved from the Thepler's bench. No sifted flour, this, but slip selvage, dry as dust. Gum arabic, by the way, is the product of an African tree, Acacia senegal. And this is highly reminiscent to me of the fancy bread department in the model bakery in Oma long ago. The dough, like clay, will be used for the making of baskets and flowers rather than for the baking of the staff of life. The clay gets a cudgelling with oaken beakers to drive out the disruptive air bubbles. Then the dod of clay is put into a hand-operated extrusion press.
This is the last one, isn't it? Yeah. I thought we were a bit faster, wasn't it? Yeah.
John Dugan, a basket maker and flourer, is about to make a large oval-lidded basket. The spaghetti-like strands or rods from the extrusion press supply his raw material. The all-important gum arabic adds to the plasticity and flexibility of the clay, and without it the task would be impossible. William Henschel is credited with introducing basket and flower making to Ballique. He came over from Stoke-on-Trent in 1865 and was one of the few craftsmen who did not return to England. He stayed to roam the banks of the Erne till the end of his life, and in fact his descendants still live in the locality. Little did anyone realize at that time just what an impact his baskets were to have in spreading the fame and adding to the fortune of Ballique worldwide. He was a man of flair and ingenuity. The Perrion baskets required considerable research in the perfecting of techniques and in the trial firings. All this was overseen by Robert Williams Armstrong, that general manager who was tireless in his search for the perfect Ballique clay body. It took about 6 years of experimentation after the pottery opened for Armstrong to achieve this and produce a small amount of quality Perrion. For he was quick to realize that although they were producing superior earthenware, to win international acclaim, the pottery must produce Perrion. The adhesive is the same clay slip, thickened with salt, with water added, that was used by the fettlers in the Perrion workshop. As in any long-surviving business, and Ballique is after all a business, there have been times of strain and crisis, and of renewal and new directions. The 2 world wars, as one might readily expect, posed their problems, for in times of madness and destruction, it is the beautiful things in life, or if you care to put it this way, the ornamentations, that suffer first. During the Second World War, Perrion production all but ceased. No china clay, and a shortage of coal to fire the kilns at the higher temperature required for porcelain. The pottery switched to making earthenware, commonware, from what little clay they had, and were reduced still further to making handleless mugs. Vincent Macaulay tells of the threepenny bit sale that took place in the pottery in the late 1930s under the shadow of another war. For threepence apiece, He says you could take away as much china as you could carry. It was open to everyone, and people in the locality for years and years had so much china they didn't know what to do with it. They even took it out and buried it. And he says, I've seen it myself, broken to make wee path roads into the houses. Finest olive oil to prevent the gum arabic in the clay from sticking to the fingers. The craftsmen make all their own tools from a variety of items, a 6-inch nail, the handle of a spoon, and even the stay of an old corset. Armstrong writes in his journal that he thought that by 1869 the pottery's Parian creations had advanced to perfection. And Queen Victoria, or whoever looked after those things for her, wanted them, and the Prince of Wales, and the Duke of Abercorn, who was and is a good local man, and the Earls of Arran and Erne and Enniskillen, and not unnaturally many others followed suit. And Queen Victoria presented a tea service to the German royal family, and I have heard it said that there is Balik china in the Kremlin. It must have got there in the days of the Tsars, for I never did hear that Lenin was much given to Parian. Not all the floral delights end up on baskets. They are also laid on selected cast pieces. The bird's nest tree stump vase that Jerry Dolan is working on is one of the older Balik designs. There are 140 employees in the pottery, which makes it by far the biggest employer in the district. And being in a rural area, most of the craftsmen are part-time farmers. The base of the basket has now spent a night in the drying room and is strong enough to support itself. It is far less fragile than the cast Parian because of the addition of gum arabic, but must still be handled with care. There were good times, there were bad times. Balik has enjoyed the good times and endured the bad ones. In the hungry 30s, the workers suffered. A single horse cart of turf fetched 5 shillings in Ballyshannon, twice as much as 2 weeks' wages in the pottery, and that's only 25 pence today. In 1946, an important event took place. New coal-fired bottle ovens were installed that could efficiently maintain the higher temperature required for Parian. At the same time, there was a revived and insatiable demand for Parian. Earthenware production ceased, and the pottery was to concentrate on the more lucrative Parian china, and has done so ever since. John Dugan is here in Balik for just over 10 years. 5 of that as an apprentice, and he says he is still learning. He's unusual, you might say, in that he's the first and only member to work here. 10 years of carefully creating these elegant baskets. His father carried the post in the neighbourhood. In 5 working days, John can make 2 large oval baskets, working from one to the other according to the state of the clay. That's a lot of baskets in 10 years. Ruffle stuff is clay that has been pressed through copper gauze and dried. This minute mould for casting the leaves of the roses is also made by John from powdered sulphur added to hot water to form a paste and made into a mould. A basket of this size will have literally hundreds of individual parts. The larger flowers with delicate stems are dried before laying on. Each basket is unique, entirely handmade from start to finish. Each one will carry its own individual and registered number. This, with a record of the date of its completion, will be kept in the Beleek Pottery files. John Keown is serving his 5 years apprenticeship to the craft, and this is one of his tasks. He will also spend time making flowers. And Jim Flanagan, qualified electrician, historian, and Beleek Fire Brigade chief, is fitting a new element into the electric kiln prior to firing. Tremendous care and attention is paid to the preparation of the baskets for the first biscuit firing. They are placed in a saggar made from fire clay and surrounded by carborundum grit. Sand supports the bigger baskets. The grit and sand are refractory materials. Their melting point is high. They will help to maintain a constant temperature around the basket during and after firing and will not stick to the period. A hollow unfired plug made from period slip and fine clay supports the lid. Special fiberglass supports the delicate handles. And it's vital that lid and base be fired together so that both will shrink at the same rate. Alumina powder will prevent a period cup from sticking to its ring during firing. Harps get the same treatment. The saggar or outer shield protects the article from a sudden blast of cold air when the kiln is opened. That would cause it to become dunted or cracked. Larger items, such as the baskets, are carefully placed in the center of the truck, where the kiln temperature will be most uniform. The articles, though white, are still technically referred to as greenware before firing. Every working day there are firings at Beleek. A rigid timetable must be adhered to. At 4:25 in the afternoon, the trucks roll into the kilns. The doors close and firing begins. Within 6 hours, the temperature will have risen to 1,120 degrees centigrade and will be held for a further 6 hours throughout the night, known as the soak or slow period. The following morning, Vincent Dolan, in charge of the firing, opens the damper to release the heat. This will gradually bring down the temperature. Now the door can be cracked, that is, opened fractionally. A sudden rush of cold air could fracture the ware, could indeed cause havoc. The total firing takes 12 hours, and the ware must be allowed time to cool before it can be handled. After the first firing, it is known as biscuit ware, because of its pale, biscuity colour. It will have contracted by as much as 40%. The baskets are brought away then for a minute and thorough inspection. The more robust Perrien passes through the vibro energy mill, where thousands of small wooden cubes jostle the ware, scouring away specks of sand and alumina and smoothing the edges. Quality control down to the most minute detail is close to the heart of Balik policy, as are also the two words, no seconds. The ware is now ready to be dipped in the glaze. The beautiful blue colour comes from a vegetable dye added purely to show up any missed areas. The excess has to be thoroughly shaken or blown off. Too much glaze could cause an unwanted greenish tinge to be present in the glaze and possible crazing after the second firing. The glaze contains lead frit, a safe form of lead, china clay and ground flint. Infrared lamps dry the glaze to enable it to be handled without fingerprints marking it. The base is wiped free of glaze to prevent it from sticking to the bottom of the kiln. The ware is carried to the kiln room where the glossed firing takes place. This will impart the exquisite pearly sheen so characteristic of Balik Perrien china. For many, a Balik basket in its delicate ivory-tinted glaze is perfection. Others prefer a subtle hint of colour. Basketware, particularly the larger baskets, are hard to find on the open market, such is the demand. In the calm oasis of the painting and decorating shop, Greta O'Loughlin plies her brush. the famous trademark, without which none is genuine. Only Perrion that has been painted gets a third or enamel firing at the much lower temperature of 700 degrees centigrade for 7 hours. John Dugan follows his creation all the way through. He says, "I get a great sense of relief and satisfaction when I see it come out of the kiln and everything is okay, the least wee mark on it, and it has to be broken." Busy female hands pack the delicate china, ready for yet another journey, though not this time within the confines of the pottery, but much, much further afield, departing like the kinfolk of those visiting aunts and uncles to distant shores. The sea at its own craftsmanship, the sea that so much inspired Annie Langley Nairn. And craftsmen here at Beleak have taken inspiration and colours from the beauty of the Erne, from the woods on its shore, and the flowers of the field and the birds of the air, and from the changing colour of the sea breaking on Tullen strand, level and long and white with waves, where gull and curlew stand.
Personally, I'm very proud of the pottery. I've worked there now most of my life. We have an association in our family with the pottery since 1868. When I go away throughout Ireland or to foreign fields and ask where I'm from, and I say I'm from a little village called Beleak, oh yes, you'll be told that's where the pottery is made. It makes you feel very proud that our little village is so widely known and famed, and this is all due to Beleak pottery.
My family have been involved with Beleak for over 100 years. I have a great sense of history of the place, and then also with my particular job as a modeller here, I occasionally come across pieces that my own grandfather has modelled, and I wonder what way he would have gone about it.
Georgian Dublin, teeming with memories of fine craftsmen in wood, metal, glass, iron, plaster, marble, gold and silver. We trace the old Dublin silversmiths from Michael's Hill, Skinner's Row and Castle Street, working in the shadows of Christchurch Cathedral, down to the silversmiths in Capel Street. The fine arts and skills of the old silversmiths, LaBosse and Power and Sawyer and West, are still very much alive in Dublin today. 5 Dublin men formed themselves into a family of silversmiths to earn their living doing their own thing. And just wait and see what that thing is. That's the designer and chaser, Tom Sharkey. Tom is designing a silver kettle, but it's really all teamwork, as everyone has a great interest in the other's job.
What do you think?
It looks a bit better now than the last one we done, doesn't it? More in proportion.
Now, the castings on the job will be this entire piece here, 4 of those, the arm here, right, the finial, and the spout, which will be in 2 halves as normal, but they won't. They'll be solid. Yeah.
And what about up here, Tommy? Is the handle going to fit into this, will it?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, now, the original one of these was supposed to break there
We're doing away with that swivel as we
at the bottom of the
agreed, right?
casting, yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to make this just one solid part, one
That's
solid
right, you can
piece.
swing it, because
Yeah,
you can spring
there's-
the handle into it.
Yeah.
See? There you are. This will have to be, of course, heavy gauge, as you were saying, John.
The silver bullion is kept in the safe. Now, this silver disc is going to go right to the top of the charts, because that's the name of this company, the Royal Charter Silver.
It's the dairy-made kettle.
This is a new one, Jack.
Yes. You want me to give you some sizes?
Size for the body, for the top and for the lid.
Yeah.
Jackie Cook's the spinner.
Ideal.
So,
Now, you've heard of the spinners in song. Well, Jackie's the spinner in silver. It's a highly skilled job to get that silver disc spun into the shape of a
11.
kettle.
By 13 gauge.
and then the top will be 7 1/4 by 12 gauge, and the lid is 3 1/2. 12 gauge.
By 12. Well, we have some circles here, Jack. We might be able to. Jack, this circle here is a little over 11 inches.
That's exactly what I want. 13 gauge. And
7
that-
inch.
yes, that's-
That'll do for that, will it?
That'll do perfect, yes.
But will you go ahead and make up the chucks for this now? I think do it in hardwood initially.
Yeah.
Then we'll take it in polypanko when we've got the proven size
Yes,
of that.
yes.
Jackie has to first make the wooden chuck. Now, this is a special type of wood. It's called lignum vitae. It's the same type of wood that the saddler has in his mallet. When the wood is chosen, it is mounted on the lathe, and it is turned down to the exact size that will suit the design of the kettle. The wooden chuck is now nearly the exact shape that Jackie requires, and all it needs now is a rub down with a piece of emery paper. The silver disc is mounted on the lathe in front of the chuck and centered. Jackie applies a drop of oil to allow the special chisel with a rounded end to glide across the silver. All that's required now is the skill of Jackie Cook. If Jackie continued to spin the silver non-stop, it would become very hard and brittle and could crack. He heats it until it's red hot. Dipped in cold water. This is called the annealing process. The silver is now soft again and can be put back on the lathe with a change of a chuck to continue the job. That reminds me of the missing silver slab. In the year 1829, Mr. West at Capel Street lost a silver slab between his premises and Chapel Lizard. Searches and rewards were in vain. The silver slab couldn't be found. 16 years later, a fellow walked into Chapman's, the silversmiths at Essex Quay, threw the silver slab up on the counter and said, "How much will you give us for that?" Mr. Chapman took one glance at it. "Hold on," says he, "till I get me glasses." Hopped out the back door and got the police. "Oh, holy, holy," says your man, "I'm innocent. I bought it off a shoemaker for a half a crown." "Oh, Janie Max is the shoemaker, I'm innocent too. I found it at Island Bridge in the gutter. I didn't know its value, and I took it down to me shoemaker's shop in Leixlip, and for the last 16 years, I've been using it as a lapstone. All the same now, weren't the people of Leixlip very fortunate to be having their old boots and shoes mended on a silver slab?
Got the right size,
Size,
all
yeah,
right, but
yeah. No, I left that.
it's not really exactly the shape. Yeah, I think it needs to go in a little bit there. You
yeah.
see, it's too flat
Yeah.
coming down there. Just in a little bit, Jack, near the top.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe when we get the other parts of it done, you know.
Yeah.
Now that Jackie has finished turning the body of the kettle, it comes to John Carroll, the silversmith.
Slightly larger at the top on account of where you'll be trimming it off there.
That's grand, Jackie. Just a little bit low there. I'll have to make it a bit higher.
Very precise work here with the planishing hammer. John is adjusting and shaping the base ring so that it'll fit into the kettle stand. This is a coating of flux which helps to braze together the silver and the silver solder. Tom Sharkey is melting wax in order to cast a pattern. First he must make a rough shape in wire. This will be one of the 3 supporting feet of the kettle stand, which is in the shape of a lion's head. The wire is coated with layer upon layer of wax, a mixture of beeswax, resin and Venice turpentine. He carves the design of the lion's features from the wax using a modelling tool. Plasticine is prepared to bed the wax model of the lion up to the halfway mark. A shutter in the cardboard is placed around the plasticine to contain the plaster of Paris. As the mixture sets so fast, Tom must press on. In a matter of minutes, it has set, and the plasticine can be removed. The surface of the first half of the mould is coated with oil to ensure that the new plaster will not stick. Molten pewter will be used to fill the mould. The pattern is now cast. It's a bit like opening a Christmas box. You know, like the element of surprise. What's inside? Will it be exactly as the designer wants it? Or how much more foiling and chasing and shaping out has to be done? You must remember, this all started from a lump of wire. Tom's experienced eyes check over the pattern in detail. He quickly spots the places that need another little bit of filing and another little bit of chasing, as the chaser is tapped out by the silversmith's hammer. When the pattern meets the designer's eye, it then goes on to be cast in silver in whatever quantity is required. John Carroll, the silversmith, is piercing the design around the top of the kettle. Now the design is ready to be snarled up. This is known as the repoussé method, from the French, but it was first introduced to Ireland by an Irishman, John Sherwin Jr., and for it and other designs for silver, he received the freedom of the Goldsmiths Guild of Dublin, which was granted to him in the year 1812. The kettle is filled with a mixture of tallow, plaster of Paris, and archangel pitch. This is to give support to the silver while the chaser is working on the design, and to ensure that the silver will not cave in. Sean Carroll is the chaser. He's also the managing director of the company. His father, John, is the silversmith. So the Carrolls have been silversmiths in Dublin for generations. You know, this kettle is going to be a masterpiece. But sure, wasn't it the silversmiths that gave us the word masterpiece? A boy had to serve 7 years to the trade. And at the end of the 7 years, he had to design and chase a piece of silver. And that had to be brought to the master of the Silversmiths Trade Guild to be passed. And if it was passed, he qualified as a silversmith. So the piece became known as the Master's Piece. The kettle sure is on the boil now, but instead of tea water, it's the pitch mixture, which goes into a container to be used again. John burns off the carbon in preparation for the final assembly of the kettle. The next stage is the brazing of the lion's feet onto the kettle stand. The spout, which was cast in 2 halves, is skillfully soldered together. The temperature has to be just right. Too hot and it will melt the silver. Do you know, it's nearly a miracle to see silversmiths working in Dublin today. because after the Act of Union in 1800, the English silversmiths were allowed to assemble their English products, send them over to Dublin and have them hallmarked in Dublin and then sell them abroad as Irish manufacture. Now, why would they want to do that? For no other reason that Irish silver and Irish silversmiths were held in the highest esteem in every corner of the globe. The handle is made of man-made fibre, similar to ebony. They say that ebony can't be got. But sure, me mother had a black ebony china cabinet for years and years. I'd say that'd be worth a fair few bob today if we could find it, or if we knew who she gave it to. The kettle is nearly ready to receive its maker's mark and make its journey to Dublin Castle to the assayer's office to receive the company mark, the finest mark and the year of manufacture mark, and be returned then to the silversmith for polishing and final stages. RCSL, Royal Charter Silver Limited. Tommy Mills, the polisher. Tommy is a highly skilled man. He's lectured in the United States of America on silver polishing. There's more to polishing silver than meets the eye. The first thing he has to do is apply a cold water cement. Stopping off, he calls it. This is left overnight to harden so as to protect the fine chasing during polishing. It's a very complicated business. Look, Tommy, tell them yourself.
Walrus hide and pumice powder, stay-pole mops and carbrags, stitch calico mops and luster, G-mops and high fin, swansdown mops, rouge and paraffin oil. And that's in sequence.
The pumice powder and walrus hide buff is for rough polishing, but you have to take it easy. You have to know what you're doing. Next, the grease mopping with heavy calico mops and a luster compound. Then it's the semi-finish. And the water of Ayr Stone is the right man for around the hinges. Very hot water with a mixture of Mersal makes quick work of the cold water cement. It's now coming to the final stages with a rub down of Swan's Down mop, Radio Rouge and paraffin oil. Despite all that polishing, Tommy isn't satisfied until he gives it a personal rub down with the Owl homemade duster.
How's it going, Tom? Finished?
Finished now, John.
Yeah. Looks fairly well, doesn't it?
I thought, yeah. I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you what you can do anyway. As soon as we put it together, you can,
I can give it a rub up later on.
yeah. Looks fairly well anyway.
There you are now. A masterpiece. Didn't I tell you? And you thought that silver craftsmanship was dead in Dublin.
Harrigy, pull hard, lads. The Kerry Curragh, 1977. The Boyne Curragh, 1937. This valuable archive film shows the construction of one of the last surviving examples of the Irish River Curragh at Oldbridge on the River Boyne, 30 miles north of Dublin. Its framework is of hazel rods, and it has a gunwale of woven sally twigs. A single ox hide covered the frame, which may have helped to dictate its shape. Such a curragh ein sheche is mentioned in early Irish literature. There are similar coracles to be found on the rivers of South Wales today, but the netting of salmon in fresh water, which became illegal in Ireland in 1948, sounded the death knell of the Boyne Curragh. The shallow draft and manoeuvrability of this curragh enabled it to get right in under the weir and avoid the undertow. This sea curragh, which is found only in Donegal in the northwest of Ireland, is remarkably similar to the Boyne curragh, and is the last traditional craft in Ireland to use the paddle. James McGonigal brought this curragh with him from Owie Island when he settled at Kincasla on the mainland 3 years ago. An old saying has it that a curragh is a man's load. This short curragh is unlikely to survive much longer. A larger rowing curragh, measuring up to 20 feet, also survives in North Donegal. James McGonigal kneels on a pad of heather or his coat to paddle. The small curragh is the ideal craft for hauling lobster pots, which have to be set as close as possible to the rocks. In the last century, it was made of hazel rods covered by ox hide, horse hide, or even sealskin, somewhat like the Boyne curragh. Now, however, the framework is of oak laths with a gunwale also of wood and a covering of tarred canvas. A bottle of holy water is always carried to ward off disaster. Here in Blacksod Bay, County Mayo, and further south off the coast of North Galway, the curragh has some distinctive features. This example is from Cleggan, County Galway. The prow and stern are not nearly so steep as in the Arran curragh. It is shallower, and its profile is less extreme. Planks set close together replace the laths used elsewhere. Though still canvas covered, the locals claim this gives it more protection from the rocks. In North Mayo, the oar pivots between two thole pins. From Achill all the way to Kerry, curraghs have a double gunwale. Wood is scarce here on the Aran Islands, and any suitably shaped branch washed ashore is put to use. The block on the floor of the bow supported a mast carrying a small lug sail, which is now scarcely ever used. A sail was also used on the curraghs of the Dingle Peninsula, County Kerry. The plank stern of Aran and Clare contrasts sharply with the Kerry design. These bladeless oars, pivoting on a single thole pin, have their only parallel outside Ireland in Portugal and Madeira. The Kerry curragh, locally called Naomh, is considered the most elegant and best finished of all, with its gently curving bow and stern. The men of Dooneen, County Kerry, show how an expert handles these long oars, keeping one hand slightly ahead of the other because of the overlapping grips. From the Cuas, beneath the shoulder of Mount Brandon, St. Brendan is reputed to have sailed the Atlantic in a hide-covered curragh in the 6th century. The craft of curragh making is still carried on in the village of Ballinvoorig nearby. One of the older men from whom Eddie Hutchinson learnt his craft boasted that practically every piece of wood in a naomh is either curved or aslant. Strange to say, the naomh was introduced to the Dingle Peninsula from County Clare only at the middle of the last century and never reached South Kerry. The 4 lengths of white deal for the bow gunnels are steamed and placed around a mould to give them the necessary curve. Their brown colour was produced by the tannin from the oak ribs, also in the steamer. The bow ribs, which need to be sharply bent, are tied around a number of metal moulds. The naomh had its heyday during the 2 World Wars. In 1942, there were 60 naomhs fishing out of the Cuas, and a night's catch might total 4,000 mackerel, and there was a ready market for them. Young Tom Hutchinson may yet be a champion oarsman like his father. At least he'll be able to build himself a naomh. The lower gunwale is laid down first. The thwarts, called tuchty in this Irish-speaking area, with a knee of aroko attached, are screwed onto it. This word tuchta, like many other boating terms, was borrowed from the Vikings who settled in Ireland. This particular naomh is a small 2-seater. The stanchions are positioned at regular intervals and hold the upper and lower gunwales together. There is a great community spirit here and lots of willing helpers. Ní neart go cur le chéile. For a number of years now, even the longer Naavogue has a narrower beam and lower gunnel than formerly, in order to make it more suitable for racing in local regattas.
Kai kan nicht gehen, du sag mir das nicht gerne. Kann ich nicht gehen. Ja. Aber die manche nach das machen, das habe ich gesagt.
Ní mór a bheith léile an taisach an ráisle.
Jack Shea from next door is here to help in putting the fancy into position.
Ó mai gindar lete. Talam na diochaine, digus sí seachas, stach le count.
Ja, 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 ja,
In the absence of a keel, the double gunnel keeps the whole structure in shape. This may explain the inverted construction which is peculiar to Irish curraghs. The Kerry Naavogue is distinguished mainly by the way in which the laths shear upwards and converge at the stern. Eddie's wife Hannah makes her contribution by painting on the Kerry colours instead of the customary green and red lead. The canvas is loosely tacked in position to get the shape right. Mary, a helpful neighbour, sews it together.
We're doing all right.
Fine.
We put it on the second time, which is all right.
I can speak because I played yesterday.
Oh, did you?
When in position, the canvas gets 2 coats of boiling tar. To carry out repairs, one simply fires the damaged surface so that the tar softens. A strip of canvas, or the tail of one's shirt in an emergency, is then stuck on. A simple case of burning one's boats. Noel Cummins, himself a Naavogue builder from Castle Gregory, pays an unexpected visit.
This is what Mikey Kelleher calls the pound of butter fold.
Talking of butter, St. Brendan is reported to have taken a quantity along with him to dress the hides he might need for repairs to his curragh.
Right, okay.
The Aran Islands, like the whole west coast of Ireland, have supported a dense population for the past 200 years, though the barren rock had little to offer these people. Here in Inishmaan, all roads lead to the sea. Isolation has ensured the survival of many elements of traditional life here, though an airstrip has recently been constructed. The benefits of modern civilization are being introduced slowly. The services of the vet are particularly welcome.
75354 DK. 75354 DK, right? Other two here, right? I can't care that. No. 85. Yeah. They are time. 41675.
On Inishmaan, the Curragh is far from being the pleasure boat it has become in Kerry. The life of this island community is still centred on it. Its capacity to withstand heavy seas and the ease with which it can be handled on the undeveloped landing places make it ideal for inshore fishing. The outboard motor is no stranger to the Curragh. The long rising bow and the round keelless bottom of the Curragh have their only parallel outside Ireland in the Scandinavian prom. This may be a pure coincidence, but one should always remember the many Irish seafaring terms borrowed from the Vikings, including in all probability the very word bod, meaning boat. Today, the slipway is the focal point on the island. Two men can comfortably carry a curragh. These curraghs are stored upside down, resting on piles of stones in a curragh pen, well out of the reach of the sea. Here comes the postman to collect and dispatch the island's mail. The fact that the curragh does not have a keel means that its bottom has practically no grip on the surface of the sea, and there is therefore little friction. This is a big advantage in stormy weather, when the curragh, being naturally very buoyant and riding high, can be spun easily into the path of oncoming waves. If the seas are really big, The oarsmen stop pulling just before reaching the crest of a wave. Last night's catch of salmon is on its way to the market. Most of the currachs are made on the island of Inisheer and have a life of about 8 years or more if well maintained. The Niveana is the island's lifeline to Galway on the mainland, ferrying as it does both passengers and merchandise. The lobsters in this box have to be kept immersed in salt water to ensure that they are still alive when they get a hot reception in Paris or London. The Niveana has to anchor some distance offshore as the sea is too shallow for her to stand in closer. This is where the currach really comes into its own. Today it is calm, but it can be a tricky and difficult task getting passengers and cargo off the boat. In a heavy swell, there is always the danger of catching the gunnel or thole pin of the currach under the rubbing strake, which surrounds the Niveana, and so capsizing. Except for smaller items, which the plane can now carry, everything else has to come by ship. The carrying capacity of the currach is enormous, and a load of 2 tons is not exceptional. On some of the islands off the Donegal coast, it was normal practice to place a beast on its back with its legs tied in a currach. The currach was then carried into the water. Here in Inishmaan and Inisheer, the stock has to swim for it. Bottled gas has made a big difference to the comforts of island life. Only a small amount of turf is now shipped from the mainland, though coal is still burnt. Whatever the exact history of the currach, it seems that currach navigation, as practiced in the days of the original Niveana, who established his monastery in Arran in the 6th century, suffered an eclipse, possibly during the turmoil of the Viking invasions. There are indications that the currach continued in use in the medieval period. O'Sullivan Bear had hide-covered currachs measuring 26 feet, constructed to cross the Shannon during his famous retreat in 1602. The increasing dependence on the sea of the congested population of the west coast is likely to have provided the impetus for the development undergone by the currach in the last century. In 1853, the Arran currach was described as being only 8 feet long, at the very time it was being introduced into Kerry from Clare in the aftermath of the Great Famine. It has served its purpose well.
weavers, tailors and cats. 3 little divils that never got fat. This is Donegal, on the northwest coast of Ireland. Rugged, remote, beautiful. These mountains by the sea were the final stronghold of the Earls of Tyrconnell and Tyrone. Long ago, these hills rang with the shouts of warriors, the tramp of armoured feet. The Earls are gone now, the battles are over, but every rock and every tree and every face carries the legacy of the Earls. A proud and independent people. The old traditions still live on. The hardy mountain black-faced sheep still graze quietly on the hillsides. And the age-old tradition of spinning and weaving continues almost unchanged. It's a hard county. The Atlantic is not always peaceful, and the people have had to challenge the sea and the land to survive. Most of the weavers live in and around the town of Ardra and have done for centuries. It was here that they held the fairs at which they sold their beautiful Donegal tweeds. Our best painters have come here to capture these colours, these contrasts. But long before them, the weavers had seen, appreciated, and blended the yellows, browns, greys, greens, and blues into the living artistry of finely woven cloth. Men like the 3 McNeilis brothers, who live here at Sandfield. Connell and Jimmy do the weaving, and John looks after the house and the garden. None of them has ever married. John enjoys his life. It's hard work, but it's a way of living that many a city dweller would envy. He has clean air, beautiful countryside, an affinity with nature, and all living things. The most important of the living things is grass. Healthy grass means hay for the cows, and cows mean milk and butter, meat and leather, and money in the bank. In Donegal, the average holding is small, but the Donegal farmer has learned the art of intense cultivation of every square yard of soil. Every little corner of arable land must pay its way by growing a crop, or feeding a calf, or raising a clutch of chickens. Take your bucket. Here. Take your bucket. Take your bucket. Take your bucket. Take your bucket. John is an expert in the art of milking a cow. Make friends with the cow. If the cow is restless, talk to her. Give her a reassuring pat, and make sure she doesn't go hungry. It's the same principle as fertilizing the fields. Feed the cows well and you get good milk and contented cows. This proud gentleman has a harem of his own at McNeilis's. And they too must be fed, and fed well, if the McNeilis's are to have a constant supply of eggs for hearty breakfasts and currant cakes. Once again, the self-sufficiency of the Donegal smallholder. The leftovers from the kitchen table make the main course for the farmyard.
Oh, you monkey, you Polly, you wouldn't take your drink. No, you wouldn't take your drink, you wouldn't. No,
Polly wouldn't take no drink. Wait a minute.
Hey, these are pretty fresh, I'll tell you that. Newly laid eggs.
Jimmy and Connell concentrate on the weaving. They work hard, very often a 12-hour day in their newly built weaving shed. All of their work is contracted to McGee's Tweed factory in Donegal town. Many people believe if it were not for McGee's, the old tradition of weaving might easily die out in this part of Donegal. The brothers will shortly move into their new house. They're happy about that. While thatched houses have a lovely tourist charm, they do lack many of the facilities tourists take for granted. Connell has to start work today by adding a new length of warp to his loom. Warp are the threads that run down the length of the cloth. Threading a loom is a lengthy and tedious business. An average piece of warp has 1,000 separate threads. Finer cloth demands up to 1,600. Each single thread has to be positioned through 4 sets of eyes. It's like threading a needle. Well, 4 needles, 1,000 times. Weaving is an ancient craft, and it's a tribute to the men who designed looms that they have changed very little in the hundreds of years since men first wove cloth on them. At its simplest, weaving means passing threads through other threads at right angles. The first weavers operated on the same principle as darning a sock. Pass the needle over one thread, under the next, over the next, and so on. The threads in cloth are called either warp or weft. Warp threads run down the length of the cloth, and the weft threads run across the width of the cloth. Weaving became mechanized when someone discovered that you could lift selected warp threads by passing each thread through an eye in a wooden frame, which they called a heddle. The heddles are raised by foot pedals. Now the weft could be shot across like a shell from a gun, as the different heddles raised and lowered different selections of threads. The invention of this system made it possible to vary the patterns in the tweed. Meanwhile, John gets on with his chores around the farm. He makes butter in the dash churn, that salty country butter I loved as a child. Very few young people have ever tasted it, I suppose. Connell is putting a roll of weft into the shuttle. Years ago, the weavers themselves had to roll the weft onto bobbins and make up the warp too. Nowadays, it's all done by machine at the factory, and the warp and weft are delivered to the weavers, ready for use on the loom. Jimmy and Connell have been weaving for the past 25 years. There wasn't, in fact, a tradition of weaving in the family at all. The brothers turned to the cloth in the 50s, when work was scarce in these parts. In bygone days, Special fair days were held in Ardra at which the weavers sold their wares. But nowadays, the McNeilses market their tweed through McGee's of Donegal, a thriving firm which has now almost 100 weavers like the McNeilses on their books. Traditionally, weavers are excellent step dancers, easily understood when you see the intricate coordination of hand and foot they learn on the loom. One of the disadvantages of weaving is that the business is so noisy and demands such concentration that conversation is impossible in the shed. It's hard physical work too. One of the sad things is that when Jimmy and Connell finish with the weaving altogether, there will be no one to take it up. Over the years, they've trained some apprentices, but none of them could stick the long hours, the hard work, and the total concentration needed.
What's the 2 cows for that one too? What's on it all today? He's on calling the sheep out. What's the calling on night? Call. Yeah, he's like playing the night. Like, yeah, it's on the road. No big traffic at all. Won't be the evening.
John McNeilis remembers his mother spinning yarn. All the women did in those days. Strangely, though, they always bought their cloth in the McNeilis family. There were 7 children, 2 girls and 5 boys. They're scattered now like so many other families from this county. England and America provided work when there was none at home, so they left. No doubt believing they would return someday. But John and Connell and Jimmy are still alone on the family's small farm. There's no one for John to teach. His great breadth of knowledge will die with him. This is not the tragedy that it might appear, because in his own life, he has achieved that diversity of function that makes for a depth of understanding in a man. And his mind is rich with memories. The spinning wheel in the kitchen, the great pots by the turf fire where the newly spun yarn was being dyed, great cauldrons of colour. And the colours came from the land itself, from the flowers of the gorse, from the bark of the trees, from pools of bog water, from lichens growing on the rocks. One of the lichens, called crottle, is still in use, but most of the dyes nowadays are synthetics from the chemical factories. But the colours are still as beautiful as ever. Someday, the small weaving sheds will disappear and be replaced by the large central factory where microprocessors and computers will organize and supervise the production of stereotyped cloths. And the men who operate them will long for a way of life in which every facet of their personalities can be developed. There are no demarcation disputes in the weaving sheds of Ardra. Mustn't that smell beautiful? Another well-made currant cake. It seems a sacrilege to slice through this beautifully woven cloth. But no artist or craftsman could possibly survive without the pain of parting with his creations. The cloth is woven in 75-metre lengths. Connell and Jimmy each produce about 150 metres of cloth every week, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on how complicated the pattern is. There are 4 basic patterns: plain, herringbone, twill, and barleycorn. When the cloth reaches the factory, it is washed in the soft, peaty water from the River Esk, which flows down from the Blue Stack Mountains. It is then dried and fully shrunk. Now it is ready for export to the fashion houses and 1,000 boutiques all over the world. Wool is an extraordinary material. It's soft, smooth, pliable, warm, yet its surface is covered with microscopic scales which help the fibres to cling together so that they can be spun together into a thread.
Come on, boys, dinner ready.
Where will this piece of herringbone finish up? In a man's sports jacket in West Germany, a lady's suit in Stockholm, an overcoat in Tokyo, who knows? But to more urgent matters. Weaving is an absorbing craft, and you don't realize how hungry you are until you stop. John knows this, and always makes sure to put on the table a dinner where quantity is just as important as quality. And when it comes to quality, where could you find a better taste than newly dug potatoes from the earth, running with salty butter straight from the churn?
You need to go out and give the calves their drinks.
Can you go out in the evening, sure?
So you will.
You wouldn't take it this morning.
Isabella was here long enough.
What do you watch on here?
Nothing down in the kitchen.
Here in the morning.
The McNeilises haven't time for many hobbies, but when they were younger, they all played a lot of football, although none of them ever made it onto the local Ardra team. They still enjoy kicking a ball about occasionally with their neighbours' children. Soon, though, it's back to work for the 3 brothers. For John, it means gathering food for the next meal. He's very proud of his garden, and rightly so, because he has as varied a supply of vegetables as you could find anywhere. The sandy soil by the sea is a hungry soil and needs plenty of manure, but it warms quickly in spring and grows wonderful potatoes and rhubarb, cabbages and lettuces. Strawberries too.
You see this bunch of shamrocks I'm looking at? I grew them from one small piece like, something like that now. Just one single root. Well now, here we don't value them so much. But during the summer months when the visitors come here, they ask you to send them for the 17th of March or St. Patrick's Day. And most people took seed from them. And as far as I know, one girl has them growing now in Holland. And she wrote some time there past before the postal strike, and she said there was nothing she cherished more than the bunch of shamrocks from Ireland.
Even in this idyllic paradise, there are deadlines to be met. Once or twice a week, a van arrives from McGee's to collect the tweed and replace the empty warp beams. Although McGee's first went into business in Donegal in 1866, It wasn't until the 1930s that Mr. Robert Temple came to an arrangement with the weavers guaranteeing them constant employment. In this way, he was able to ensure continuity of supplies and, more important still, continuity of patterns and colours to eager customers. Different breeds of sheep produce different types of wool. The wool of the Donegal blackface sheep contains long fibres of kemp, nowadays considered too coarse on its own for cloth, but very valuable for carpet making. The wool used for tweed is a blend of Donegal blackface, Down, Cheviot, and Australian Merino breeds.
Well, mate.
Hello, Eddie.
You have a hit today with you? He's well.
You have a lovely day. Hello, Joe.
Hi. Hi. There's plenty of stuff made today.
Plenty of stuff, Eddie. Oh, boys, aye. Yeah, good, aye.
I'm getting well on. I have a few.
Oh, well. You have many more pills to go, Eddie?
I have 3 or 4 to go to on the way home now.
You haven't to go to Dublin.
That's good. Well, is the weather going to improve here?
Did you go to the bog yet?
Huh?
Did you go to the bog?
Oh, I have the turf cut now. I suppose you can go on to vote tomorrow.
Well, think we'll bloody make it.
Pennies for Europe.
Oh, he's a good man.
Well.
And if that, we'll forget about them.
Forget about them.
Don't forget to give them a
Well,
whoop.
they'll forget about us from one of the two.
Don't forget to give them a whoop tomorrow.
Well, all the best, boys, now.
Cheers, Eddie. Good luck, boys. Good luck, Eddie.
Good luck now.
John has been making butter so long now that he doesn't realise how skillful he is. But a modern city housewife would be completely lost if you handed her a few gallons of milk and asked for butter. When the churning is over and the butter collected, it has to be well washed. Then the salt, not too much, not too little. Mix it in thoroughly. For nothing tastes worse than butter without salt, except maybe hot milk or a soft-boiled egg. Now, a few more pats to put it in shape, and there you are. Put that on the cake we made earlier, and you wouldn't call the king your uncle. So, the skill and the traditions and the lifestyle of the McNeilises will die, inevitably. But men have always made things of beauty, and they always will. The creations will be different. Is there really all that much difference between the weaving of cloth and the building of a spacecraft? We are different from all other animals and from machines because of our imagination, our creativity, our vision of how things might be. What we may lose is our closeness to nature, our link with the earth, and the range of the human spirit.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, who was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended in the hell authority, he arose again from the dead, ascended into heaven, which is the right hand of God.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
blessed art thou among men and blessed the Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Hail Mary, Christ, Lord, be blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed fruit of thy womb.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. May the divine assistance always remain with us, and may our souls and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
If an Irish Rip Van Winkle slept for 100 times the legendary 20 years, he would find two things somewhat familiar on his reawakening: the Gaelic language and hurling. They are now greatly changed, but their cure remains. Hurling is the Irish version of the ball and stick game known in many parts of the world. In the Cuchulainn legend, at least 1,000 years old, but purporting to refer to a much earlier period, the ball and stick are used not only for play but for killing. As a game, it may have developed from a form of hunting, when a stick was used to propel a stone into a flock or a herd. Two distinct forms of the game were known in Ireland: hurling and Comaunacht. The Comaun used in Comaunacht was probably made by pulling up an ash sapling and paring its root to flatness. The hurl has long been made by felling an ash tree and shaping parts of it so that the roots act as blades. The ash is favoured because it's so resilient. For the same reason, it makes the best swingle tree. It has a marvellous springy quality. Country people say, you think it was alive. Edward and Michael Brennan have shrewd eyes for the best makings of a hurl. The old way of felling the tree was to dig around its roots and, using a mattock and axe, cut through the taproot. Today, the chainsaw is used as its tip cuts down at an angle into the roots. This is not possible with a handsaw. The ancient way of unselving a tree still persists. However, even into this intimate task, the machine is making its way.
That's not too bad now. Clean enough.
No, that's a good stick.
Inch sawmills on the River Nore near Kilkenny town. Liam Brett starts the mill by turning the wheel that will cause other wheels to turn. The invention of the wheel was a mighty step forward, and in the watermill, the natural and man-made are beautifully fused. At the end of this power sequence is a modern wheel, the circular saw. Liam Brett is the third generation to own and run Inch sawmills. His son is the fourth. It doesn't require a calculator to work out what a massive saving on electricity he's making by using water power. Once upon a time, a traveller in Wales was amazed because he saw hardly any ash or willow trees, and this was before the days when the woods were felled for pit props. He inquired and was told that the ash and the willow had been devoured by the passion for bandy, the Welsh form of hurling. Ash is scarce in Ireland because it burns so readily and so cleanly, and because the Forestry Department do not include it in their scheme of things. This scarcity is among the reasons for the high cost of hurleys. So is the amount of patient labour the craft demands. Hurls are being made from fiberglass and plastic, but they lack the spring and resilience of the wood. Hurl makers are few, and most, like the Brennans in Kilkenny, live in areas where the game is strong. John Surlis is an exception. He plies his craft in Monasterraden, County Roscommon, a county where Gaelic football is king.
Would you like to be able to make one?
Yeah.
Will you get, if you have the time, you can watch me.
What is that?
Ash. They call the plant because it's a young ash. Do you see how it's made now?
Yeah.
Now, how would you know a good hurley?
It's good and strong.
Yeah. And the grain running all the way down, round about that way. And when you get it coming all the way straight and around about in the horseshoe shape, that's a good hurley, because when you hit the ball, if it was straight, that piece it'd break off, and all you had left was the straight bit then. You'd be shouting for a hurley. And you cut it in the fall of the year, from October till March, and the sap is in the centre of the din, and down in the root, and it won't take so long to season. If you cut it in summertime, it'll be all sap and soft. And you never heard of Christy Ring?
No.
Well, he was supposed to be the best hurler in Ireland, and he died a few years ago. All right, I think it's all right. We'll finish it on the grey mare.
John uses the Cooper's mare, a medieval type of vice. He uses too the spoke shave, another instrument long known to those who shave things with loving sensitivity.
Now, all I'll have to do is take the track of the saw. All right. Now do you see the grain? All the way down. Look. And round about. We have the track of the saw off it now. That's the sawdust. We're down to the right side.
What's that sandpaper there for, Grandad?
The sandpaper?
Yeah.
Well, it gives a grip. When I leaned up, pressed down on that, the sandpaper gives it a rough grip.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have sandpaper on it, I'd have to do this with the saw to roughen that so it wouldn't be slippery. And the same here. But the sandpaper is rough and it's able to hold it. Now, now look, you couldn't pull it out.
The Butler Castle overlooks the River Nore. Kilkenny town is the home of Rémy Dowling, maker of the well-known Star Hurley. He gets his ash trees planked by Liam Brett. His son Tom marks out a batch of hurls. They're made in 6 different sizes, from the 28-inch junior hurl for 7- and 8-year-olds up to the 38-inch senior hurl. A map of the distribution of hurling would show a remarkable fact. It's played almost entirely in the more fertile parts of the country, and few parts are more fertile than Kilkenny, and it's the only county where hurling predominates almost to the exclusion of Gaelic football. Rémy Dowling is among its folk heroes. He was a goalkeeper, an art for which the county is especially famous. He belongs to a great line that includes Jimmy O'Connell, Ollie Welsh and Noel Skehan. A hurling goalkeeper's margin of error is like that of a batsman in cricket. Tantalising, the tiniest error can undo him. It's among the reasons for Rémy Dowling's expertise in the making of hurls. A keeper uses 2 kinds of hurls, one for general play and another for taking a free stroke. The difference between the former and the latter is almost as great as that between the modern hurl and the ancient command. It's in a way truly an art, like the bowmakers of medieval times, vital to the warfare of their tribe. Shaping the hurl on the bandsaw is called sliding. Rémy's sons, Tom and Brian, carry on the craft. Rémy's wife, Breda, is the daughter of the late Tom Neary, the hurl maker, who started making hurls in 1921. In the old days, they looked for an ash plant growing out of a bank with a nice curve to its root. Rémy also made hurls from white elm. But the handle had to be insulated, as one got a sting when one walloped the ball. Willow is also used. When Ramey has completed the sliding, his son Brian takes over. This is the same job that John Surlis was doing on the Cooper's Mare, except Brian uses a bench stop. The tools are similar. Come is the Gaelic word for a hurl. Its root is cown, the word that in several languages denotes bent or crooked. The original hurley may have been nothing more than a shepherd's crook. Today's hurl is the product of generations of experience and experimentation. And the experimentation goes on. Even the concept of a single piece of ash is no longer sacred. Some players, indeed, prefer a hurl with a segmented blade. The sanding machine has speeded up this part of the job. In the old days, a piece of broken glass was used to smooth the hurl. Ger Fennelly, the brilliant Kilkenny man, drops in with the broken hurl for repair.
Hi, Brian.
I'm sure. How are you keeping?
Well,
You have a problem?
I've been with a problem after last Sunday's match.
You want a piece in it, I see.
Yeah, I want a piece.
Okay. You'll want it for the weekend anyway?
We have a match on Sunday, you know, if you could have it for Sunday.
Oh yes, I'll have it Friday evening. You'll be passing by, will you?
Should I call about 3 or 4 o'clock then?
Oh, that's great, that's great. I'll have it then.
Okay then.
Okay, Ger.
Yeah.
All the best.
Brian will have to cut and glue a piece of ash to the damaged hurl. Hurling has about it a mystique that Gaelic football cannot match. One of the reasons is that it's the more skillful game, and part of the reason is that it's ancient. Modern football is only as old as inflatable rubber, and in some parts of the country you will hear the older generation say, "Football is not much of a game. The good people never played it." The good people are the fairies, and the reference is to the frequency with which hurling occurs in the tales about them. But the hurling in the fairy tales was Camanachd, the ancient game of the narrow stick. As distinct from the hurl, it had no boss or blade. It's often referred to as winter hurling, the other form, summer hurling. Summer hurling was like cricket, in that it was closely associated with the big house. Landlords kept teams of hurlers, just as their counterparts across the Irish Sea kept teams of cricket players. This inter-house rivalry was intense, and it was common in 18th century newspapers to see advertisements for hurling matches. The Act of Union and the decline of the big house brought this kind of competition to an end, and organised hurling languished until the coming of the GAA. Brian has to make his own two-headed nails. Not so long ago, Cooper's nails would have been available for the job. The hurling heartlands of today are almost all territories where once the summer game and the big house flourished. And all but one of these heartlands are in the southern half of the country. The exception is North Antrim, a reminder that the narrow sea between there and Scotland is less a boundary than a roadway. The foundation of the Gaelic Athletic Association had a curious sequel. The older form of the game soon disappeared. It is sometimes said that the GAA gave official recognition to the newer form, but perhaps it had no choice. Gaelic football grew in popularity like grass in a showery May, and in many parts of the country seems to have supplanted winter hurling. Winter hurling survives now in the Scots Highlands in the form of shinty. It's a very different game from modern hurling, and attempts to create a compromise form have failed. Owen Ruo O'Sullivan, the celebrated Gaelic poet of the 18th century, wrote a poem about the ideal spade. And a man will cherish his spade or his hayfork or his slan as he would a hurl or a musical instrument, because, as we would say, it suits him. It makes his work easier. And in the same way, some men are loath to discard a damaged hurl. It may have a special feel which they fear they can never recapture, or they may believe that it is their lucky hurl. And thus they will get the hurl repaired, even though this breaches the sacred tradition that a hurl must be a single piece. A band of metal also helps to strengthen the hurl. Brian Cody is another of today's young lions. He's Kilkenny's captain. His team are about to play Cork in the All-Ireland final. The prize is hurling's holy grail.
They look grand, Remy. Yeah, that's nice. Grain looks very good in that one.
Yeah, good bit of timber, very good bit of timber.
That one? Ah, yeah, this is one I really fancy, all right.
Yes, the bands and that do them up.
Ah, that's a grand job
Yeah.
out here.
Well, as long as they're lucky.
Exactly. That's what matters.
How about that one then?
Here's another one, Brian.
Another one.
Brian.
I'll never make me mind up.
Out, huh?
But that's a grand hurl, Remy. It is.
Yes, yeah.
It feels very like the other one, this one
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
A very similar type of hurls. Great grain in it again, and
Grand.
I like the hand, I like the grip. I suppose I better make up your mind anyway, Remy.
Yes, yes, right now, well, that's up to you.
Suppose I took these two, how would that be?
Yeah, that'll do grand, Brian. That'll do
That's
grand.
great, Remy. They're
As
two
long
good.
as they're lucky, that's the main thing.
Hopefully they're two
Yeah.
grand stakes.
The firm of O'Neill's in the heart of Dublin has been renowned for the making of schlithers, the Gaelic word for the hurling ball, for a very long time. Liam Dargan uses all the techniques of a saddler and harness maker. The thread he prepares for sewing has a needle on each end and must be rolled and waxed to make it waterproof. Schlither almost certainly comes from lither, the old word for hair, and the typical hurling ball in older days was of horsehair in a pigskin casing. Not long ago, schlithers were the colour of natural leather, brown. White leather, a new introduction, makes the schlither easier to see, particularly when practicing at dusk. The leather palms he puts on prevents the sewing thread from cutting into the side of his hands when he draws the stitches tight. The modern ball is the subject of continuous experiment. The main ingredient is now cork, encased in spun yarn dipped in latex. The modern ball is more streamlined too, and its greater carry is changing the tactical shape of the game. Such men as Liam Dargan do not see their names on the sports pages, but on the pitch they can see the effect of their handiwork. Hammering the ball rounds the joints and sets the stitches. When the cricket bat strikes the ball correctly, the meeting of willow and polished leather produces a sweet sound. So too does the wedding of ash and slither. Today is the testing time for Brian Cody and his Warriors, and for the hurl that Rémi Dowling and his sons wrought for them. Kilkenny meet Cork in Dublin's Croke Park for the All-Ireland hurling final. The ending is happy. Brian's hurl proves to be lucky after all.